Those holidays are creeping up, folks, and so are dinner parties if you're coming over. And there were some folks that said, hey, how do I do a stuffing? Well, it's actually quite easy, so we're going to go over how to take on this very simple and classic stuffing, and you can get everything locally. It's actually budget friendly. However, there's a lot of history behind this. Stuffing versus dressing. You know, people forget it's just another dish that has its own identity by region and ultimately family tradition as well. So whether you cook it in the bird or out of the bird, one thing stands clear. It's always delicious no matter what you call it. Now, north of the Mason-Dixon line, it's traditionally called stuffing, while south of the Mason-Dixon line, it's traditionally called dressing. So we're going to take a look at both regions and learn a few facts. Stuffing is an old British word. It dates back to 1538 and still around today. Our region still reflects the original English heritage of the first settlers to the country. And yes, traditionally it is cooked inside the turkey due to the lack of large stoves. They didn't have the equipment back then. But those flavors of the turkey and whatever else was stuffed inside the carcass would add additional flavors into that stuffing. Fast forward to today, it's still considered stuffing even if it's not cooked inside the bird. We say that word interchangeably. Now heading to the south, it's called dressing. And dining was a formal event historically in the South. White families with baronial Scottish heritage, they had skilled black slaves in the kitchen. Staff were instructed to present an elaborately dressed turkey with stuffing arranged outside the bird. And after the Civil War, many of the former kitchen slaves left their homes in the South, and they sought out first-time employment in the North. The word dressing also migrated with them. So it's definitely brought itself an identity elsewhere and not just the South. So what is stuffing? So the standard is that stuffing starts as a bread-type base with herbs, spices, stock, vegetables, and butter. Now, just like bread pudding, the bread is often stale and is optimally used to prevent waste. In the South, cornbread dressing is a definite go-to favorite where they'll add smoked sausage, country bacon, or diced ham. Both New England and Louisiana, there was a time that oysters were favored in their stuffing or dressing. In other parts of the country, you'll hear that there's a rice-based dressing, which is another traditional choice. So for more information, there is a lot of history. It is excellent reading. Take a look at these links if you ever have some time. I actually found it to be very fascinating how this one food developed in different areas of the country. I really did enjoy that reading. So pad of paper and pen, folks. Put a pause on this video, write down your ingredients. You are in charge of how far you want to take your seasonings. I did go a little bit more generous on the chicken stock because not all bread is baked the same. The ingredients can definitely make or break you. And it's important to work with stale bread, not folded bread, stale bread, the kind where it's not fluffy anymore. So you definitely want to slice, cut it into strips, and then dice it as evenly as you can. Here I'm working with stale sourdough bread. I couldn't resist it because the flavor is so much more intense. And it's very easy to cut up, as you can see here. And we want to keep it like 1/4 of an inch or even 1/2 an inch. As long as the cuts are as consistent as possible, that's really that all that matters. Now, if you do get fresh bread, let it sit out after you've diced it. Constantly shake it up and turn it for the next 2 to 3 days, because that's a great way to make bread stale up a little bit better. And as you can see here, we've got the garlic happening. You can either finely dice or mince it with a knife, or use a garlic press, whatever is easiest for you. Just get that sucker chopped down good. And that's also up to you. If you want to use more garlic, have at it. Lots of flavor, that's what we're all about. Now the goal with the rest of the items here, for the vegetables, we want to finely dice them. So the term is brunoise. It's taking julienne strips and dicing them. Now, because we're doing a stuffing that's outside the bird, we want to make sure everything cooks appropriately. Now, if you are lucky enough, grab some rainbow carrots. If not, regular carrots are fine. It does provide a nice garden flavor to the stuffing. And it gives extra moisture too. When it starts cooking, the moisture is going to come right out of those vegetables. Now, I'm using some leftover bell pepper strips that I had. A great way for refrigerate, folks. Oh my God, if you've got leftover vegetables, stuffing is a great way to use that so you don't waste it. So I'm just using bell peppers here, green and red. The colors are beautiful. And last but not least, we've got the squash. I have some summer squash and I've got some zucchini. And we're doing the same thing, keeping the cuts as small as possible. I like variety and I love the color that this brings in the stuffing. And again, I don't want to waste anything. This is perfect for getting more vegetables in your kid's diet, by the way. I know that stuffing can bring forth a lot of creativity. Same thing with dressing. But mind you, in my house, we call stuffing, whether it's in or out the bird. So it is interchangeable in my home. See how nice and small that is? This is going to cook up perfectly. So medium-high heat. We got a lot of butter. We're not eating the whole pan of stuffing, although my husband could. I got about maybe 4 to 5 tablespoons of butter in there. I already had salt in the pan, but we want to get that good and melted, and I certainly want to get this pan hot. Now I already have some mise en place off camera here. I do have some spices ready, and as you can see poking through on the side there, I've got my bowl of bread. Look at that, right in the pan. This is going to be so easy, folks. It's painfully, ridiculously easy. This is why it's so important to make things as simple as possible when you're getting started. Especially for first-timers that have never tackled this. You're going to have a lot of fun with this. You'll find it's quite a palette that you can build your own creation. And it's a lot of fun. I'm using some dried dill. I love the flavors of dill. I find the dry, once it's rehydrated, it gives it a beautiful flavor. And you're basically having a little bit of a facial here. It's a beautiful thing. So we're tossing around the bread. Ultimately, I want everything to get soaked up with the butter. And I want the dill to glue to everything. And ultimately, I want to avoid burning this. So I am constantly moving the pan around, moving the spoon around, because I want this to get kissed beautifully. Now, this is not something you can walk away from. This can burn wicked fast. And that's certainly something you don't want to do after all the prep work you just did. Now, what I'm demonstrating is actually a lot smaller than the written recipe because it's just 2 people. The other will probably feed 4 to 6 people, depending upon your appetite. So after about 5 minutes, we're going to add the finely diced vegetables and the garlic. Now, I didn't add the garlic first because I don't want to burn it. It goes in with the vegetables. And this ultimately is going to start bringing the moisture out of those vegetables. The colors are just beautiful. It's awesome. And I have so much fun with this because you can get very creative, actually. And we are tossing and turning. This probably another 5 minutes. It just depends on how far the vegetables have cooked. And it really doesn't take long. I actually like this approach because I can control how far I want that heat to go. So we're constantly tossing and turning. Again, we don't want this to burn. Make sure you control your heat. If you find the pan is starting to show some brownie bits, turn the heat down a little bit. That way you can avoid potential burning. So I'm adding a little bit more dill. I also have poultry seasoning that has no salt in it. I like to control the amount of salt that goes into this, especially stuffing, because ultimately we don't want to kill people. I use kosher salt, by the way. I never use table salt. Now I'm going ahead and adding some thyme, and I also have a little bit of rosemary, and I want the heat to start waking up the natural oils in those dried seasonings. And we're going to toss that, and eventually we're going to start working with the chicken stock. Now, I was very generous on the chicken stock. You may not need all of that, but it's good to have extra on hand. All breads are going to play differently when you're making a stuffing, so it's always good to have extra. So here I have some chicken stock with mustard powder and turmeric, and I'm just adding a little bit to get started here. And what we want to do is to add a little hydration, but not to the point we're doing bread soup. That's going to be nasty. Now, it's up to you how far you want to take it. I would start with a half a cup of fluid, like I did here. Feel free to add more to your own liking. Some folks do like it very soft and tender. Some folks like a little bit of bite to the stuffing, and that's okay too. So ultimately start with a half cup and go from there. And as you can see, some of this is clumping a little bit. You can see some of the cubes are starting to lose its cubiness. And feel free to taste test, because ultimately the seasoning is up to you. I don't believe in putting a whole lot of measurements when it comes to seasonings. Some things I will. This one is definitely not something I would measure out, because what we like will always be different than what you like. So it's nice to have a little bit of control in what you're cooking. So I've shut the heat off, because at this point I like the way the stuffing is coming across. I don't like a mishy-mashy stuffing. I do like to have this somewhat toothsome. And hit it with a little bit of more spice at the end. This is going to finish cooking for you, because that ultimately, the fluids you've put in, it's going to help. And it's definitely something you can have a lot of fun with. Now, you could easily do this in the oven, but you have to be more mindful of temperature control, and you have to be careful about the fluid. You could easily put everything in just that one silver bowl and add your fluids there, toss a coat, and cook it on 350 for about 20 to 30 minutes, depending upon bread type. Entirely up to you. And then with another, I think I did about a third of a cup of fluid at this point. Added a little bit more to the pan. And at this point, you'll start to see some browning. This is where you gotta be careful. Browning is beautiful, dark is dangerous. If you've ever tried stuffing that was slightly burnt, yeah, gag, total gag. So definitely be conscious about how far you take the browning. And this is already looking beautiful. And another taste test to see how far this has come. Look how beautiful that is. Lots of color. Even with the browning, you can still see the vegetables. Now, sometimes I'll add a little bit of Parmesan to this. My husband loves that flavor. Instead of the chicken stock, sometimes I'll use a mixture of chicken stock and wine. That's a beautiful flavor. You don't have to. It's just an idea. You can also consider cooking sausage or other proteins in this. So let's check it out. How did it come out? Check this out. Look at that beautiful color. Simple to make and plenty of room if you want to add your own creativity. Sausage, oysters, baked ham, or you can just keep it vegetarian. So be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching, folks.